So there's this term I wanted to do a quick video on. It came up while I was putting together the last episode I made for my translation of Harald Finehair or Fairhair Saga. And it's this term that comes up regularly. It's used in research on history, and it's the term hunter-gatherer. And it's kind of, for me, emblematic of there's a trap hidden in it, and it's a trap we fall into as modern interpreters of history, I believe. And the term hunter-gatherer is emblematic of it. The image it kind of conjures, at least in my head, but I think in many others, is of simple people, low technological development, primitive belief systems, primitive philosophy, primitive social constructs, generally very little sophistication involved. And I find this well, if it's just a bad habit in my reaction that I get these images, then it's something I have to fix. But I think when I read academic papers, I also think the implicit reductionist view of such terms bleeds into how we view us in the past. And I think for me, a reminder is there's this really amazing book written by a Swede, Yngve Ryd. I think it's called in Swedish Eld, Flammor och Glöd. In Norwegian it's called Bål, Samisk Ildkunst. Basically it's a book, and it's not, unfortunately, not translated to English. I hope it is one day. It's one of the most amazing books about hunter-gatherer life, if you would say, or nomad life. It's a book written about Sami traditions of making fire. And it's incredible. It's such a beautiful book, and basically it's a collection built around, the book is written by Yngve Ryd around interviews he did with Sami old-timers who were reindeer herders, or who lived outside and had to survive the obviously very, very harsh conditions of Arctic nomadic life. And I really find it fascinating in the sense that the image that is often conjured up when we talk about, for example, cultures who would have had similar lifestyles 300 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. We think their spiritual beliefs are shallow. Even their tools might to the eye look crude, hence their craft is crude. And why haven't they organized in modern metropoles? So their general outlook on the world and life has to be crude or primitive or less sophisticated or a lower truth. Now, if you have had the privilege of meeting people who have lived lives like this, or who still have contact with their traditions, you'll know that a view like that is about as far from real life and truth as you can possibly get. If you put people who've kind of had to hone their outlook on life and their spiritual grounding through such adversity, and not being stuck in front of a computer or a smartphone, but actually living out in what is the real world, you'll find that they are extremely grounded, have deep knowledge of nature, deep knowledge of human relationships, a spiritual connection that is much more sophisticated and much more in tune than what is unfortunately normal in our urbanized lives.
And so in this book, Bold på samisk vis, we get to learn from these old timers through the simple fact of them telling about how they gather wood, what type of wood, and all the small details around this act of surviving by fire in extremely harsh conditions. You also get a profound and very practical insight into daily spiritual life. How, without they saying it directly, you understand very quickly how a people like that, for example, like wouldn't chop down whole forests. Like we hear about one of the theories for the extinction of megafauna through hunting, which I personally think is a not very well substantiated theory. But one of the theories is that they were hunted down and that the hunter-gatherers couldn't kind of regulate themselves. Well, when you read a book like Boll på samisk vis, and you hear them talking about how they pick wood, how they go about their lives, even if they're not saying it directly, you understand that they're very particular of not disturbing the natural way of nature. Like one way they could spot the Norwegians or the Swedes was that they didn't clean up their campsites, the fire sites. So the Sami would always clean it up so you couldn't see there had been a fire. But the Norwegians, they never did that. Yeah, so the book is a really good reminder for me that when I see that term, I don't particularly like it because I think it's extremely reductionist, but I can see the practical aspect of it, having a term like that. But just to remind myself, I try to remember that book and other experiences to remind that it doesn't, that the implications of the term doesn't bleed in to how I analyze or see, that I stay open-minded.
There are still people who live what we would call hunter-gatherer, nomad, Neolithic, if we use these terms. And anyone who has had the privilege to live among them, or maybe has even family or themselves has grown up in such a context, knows that the kind of in-baked reduction of human life implicit in those terms absolutely doesn't apply to what reality is. Yeah, I think it's really important. So many times we tend to, it's like, I would say, if you were a betting person and you could bet on this, I mean, what I would go long on was that everything is older, more sophisticated, and spiritually deep than the prevalent general view within scholarly research. So they always err on the side of people in the past being more stupid, less sophisticated, primitive social life, primitive spiritual life, and generally things don't have a long history. If you make that bet, there's only upside. There's almost no downside. Dates are always pushed to older dates, and we always find out, oh, they could do ironworking much earlier. Actually, it was super sophisticated. Actually, we can't replicate how many of the things that pre-dynastic Egyptians did. So if you go long on those bets, you can make a lot of money if it was possible. So we have to be really, or I can't say we, but I personally try to be really careful with these terms, such hunter-gatherer, such terms. Be really careful with them. That was all a little rant here, but it's something that keeps popping up when you read research papers and stuff like that.